the Museum of the Palace of Fine Arts, which will be a whole series of events as a continuation of the celebration of her centennial. Well, my talk will link to what Whitney said because I want to talk about how aspects of Mexico are perceived in Leonora's work that many times people do not perceive, perhaps, which has to do a lot with the first impression that she had when she came to Mexico in 1942. And she remembered in an interview that her impression was that everything was new. The spirit of the people, the variety of the food, plants and animals, even the landscape and contact with the dead. And it is these points that I want to approach here with reference to some of our paintings linked to all the myths, pre-Hispanic myths and legends that she discovered here in Mexico. Far away from war, in a country where magic is part of everyday life, Carrington's production flourished, and her complex iconography started to include motifs related to rituals and traditions of the local culture, as well as pre-Hispanic myths and legends that are intermingled to create a syncretism with the Celtic mythology and mythologies of other civilizations, ancient civilizations. Next one. In Sanaí of 1951, for example, Carrington refers to one of the main celebrations within the pagan tradition that commemorates the new Celtic year that takes place on October 31st, or the first full moon in Scorpio. That coincides almost exactly with the Day of the Dead that is celebrated here in Mexico. This ritual, the Celtic ritual, is the night of the ancestors, so the banquet of the dead. It was believed that this was the night in which divination and rituals were appropriate, since living and dead were only separated by a very slight veil. In this painting we see two main figures, one in white and the other one in black, separated by a small wall on which there is a white and a black bird, alluding to the encounter between life and death, light and darkness. In this painting, the artist incorporates the jaguar figure, the jaguar, which is a venerated animal in the pre-Hispanic cultures, the attributes of which is to guide the souls of the dead, like a cancerberus. The next one, please. The variety of plants that she came across in Mexican lands were of great interest to her, as well as to her friends, Remedios Varo and Cati Orna, with whom she would go to the Sonora market looking for herbs to use in her culinary experiences or her research into the magical and medicinal properties of plants. Next one. In a drawing, an early drawing that she carried out for Remedios Varo and she gave to her, she designed a fantastical vehicle with the shape of a shark with an inscription that is referring to protecting her with a spell against the evil eye. The shark is triggered by a mechanism activated by two magical plants, as you can see. Next. A mandragora, the legendary root, the mandrake, the legendary plant that has the root of which has the form of a human shape, which is used as a protection and toloache, used widely in Mexico because of its psychotropic uses or applications. For Celso, whose treatises on herbal medicine were well known by Leonora, Celso referred to the quintessence, which is the title of this aquarelle, this water painting, the name that he devoted to the active components of all the hallucinogenic properties of vegetable plants. The representations of hallucinogenic plants that were used in this country among the ancient pre-Hispanics in their rituals, so that priests and shamans could communicate with the deities, is a common motif in Carrington's work. In this painting from 1944, that refers to her exile and her husband's exile, the Dr. Weiss, the Hungarian photographer that she married in Mexico. The artist depicts a figure that emerges from a kind of balloon. This is a detail of this painting, surrounded by different plants like cannabis, the scientific name of marijuana, and other plants that seem to evoke mushrooms, which are used in the search to expand consciousness and have contact with other realities, other layers of reality. In this painting of the holy herb represents a plant that is widely used in Mexico and Mesoamerica by different healers and shamans. The leaves are burnt with incense, and they're carried around your neck to avoid diseases and to increase the psychic powers of the carrier. In the painting, we can see a monkey with a red plant on his head, and on the chest, there's a head of a reindeer. The red plant is very similar to a plant used by the shamans in Oaxaca, known as the Aqualeus pumilus, a plant that is close to the holy herb that is used for divination. The monkey and the deer seem to make reference to days Reindeer 1 and Monkey 1 of the pre-Hispanic calendar, in which the Chihuateteo, the goddesses, could actually visit Earth, come back to the Earth. Carrington surely was deeply impressed by the pre-Hispanic codexes and the myths and legends that she came across in Mexico. In the writing for the stone door that originally was called the open stone door, that is perhaps from the 40s, Carrington makes reference to an encounter with Coatlicue, the mother of the god Huitzilopochtli, and Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent. A river, the water, a father, which are some of the connotations of this work. He thinks, Leonora writes, that important events will occur on these lands since the gods are evil and dangerous. Perhaps he's afraid, she continues to write. Symbols open the pathway to reality that are surrounded by living matter. The sign will appear undoubtedly, and then we will be able to see and to actually know. This is what he says. Benjamin Peret, the surrealistic poet that was a partner of Remedios Varo and a close friend of Leonora Carrington, studied since his arrival in Mexico in the 40s. Fascinated by Mexican mythology, he compiled works that he would publish as the anthology of myths, legend, and popular stories in Latin America. He translated a part of the Chilambalam, a codex written in the Mayan Yucatec language using a Latin alphabet. These manuscripts were attributed to a legendary author called Chilambalam. Chilam is a priest, a prophet, and Balam is a name given to the jaguar in Mayan. The codex is more than prophecy. It also describes the complex astronomical system and the treatise of medicinal plants and magical spells. Undoubtedly, some of the research carried out by Peret were of great importance to Carrington. He also wrote a lot about Quetzalcoatl, the god, the pre-Hispanic, and his equivalence in the figure of the jaguar. In this painting that Leonora entitled The Jaguar, from 1945-54, refers the first arcane of the tarot, which is the juggler or the magician. This card is represents the Superman that can create and connect earth and heaven and earth, of connecting the microcosmos and the macrocosmos. This was a topic, a motif shared by the surrealists. And although Carrington's work is subject to many interpretations, this painting, this canvas, refers to the pre-Hispanic myth and its correspondence to the figure of the juggler in Latin America, which is the figure of Quetzalcoatl, the god, the plumed serpent, the Aztec deity, and the archetype of the shaman, too. The name implies plumed serpent and represents the union of the conscious and unconscious realm. Quetzalcoatl is a white magician connected to the earth through the serpent form and to the heaven through the plumes that allow this deity to fly. Carrington wrote and produced plays for which she designed the outfits and the scenography. This had an influence on her painting. In Juggler, a kind of tent with a red curtain evokes the pre-Hispanic murals and acts as the scenery for what seems to be an extraordinary representation of a shamanic representation, surrounded by 4 circles with figures that allude to the 4 elements. Carrington presents a microcosmos of the universe in a fantastical forest. The main figure has a white turban and tunic. With his feet on the earth, he raises his arms to sustain the feathers of a serpent that is surrounding his body. It suggests the image of a priest magician that allows the god to emerge in the shape of an animal. To the right, there's a white mysterious figure emerging from smoke. The painting makes references to one of the Quetzalcoatl myths that describes his exile to the city of Tula under the spell of the black magician Tezcatlipoca, the deity of the night heaven. This painting is populated by hybrid beings and animals that face different characters that remind the Nahual, a pre-Hispanic belief in gods taking on animal figure. These Nahuales are represented in the codexes that Carrington knew well, and in some traditions it was also believed that people are born with an animal spirit known as the Nahual of the person, that comes from the Nahuatl language that is Nahuale, which means hidden and or occult, that protects the individual throughout his life. An alter ego that is part of the iconography of Carrington, who, since her childhood, would identify with the horse, the figure of the horse. This scene is sustained by a series of fantastical animals that simulate the 4 cosmic pillars, or the gods that carry the heavens, that are represented in the reliefs of the pillars of the Chichen Itza pyramid and also in the Borgia Codex. In 1963, her friend, Ignacio Bernal, an archaeologist, invited her to paint a mural for the new Museum of Anthropology. Thanks to this commission, Leonora traveled to Chiapas. Laurette Sejourné and the Swiss anthropologist Gertrude Stein, the first woman who managed to get involved in the Lacandon culture, helped her in her research and gave her accommodation in their homes in San Cristobal de las Casas. Although she studied the Popol Vuh and the Mayan codexes, she carried out many studies in situ. She visited the churches in Chiapas. These are the first 2 sketches, 2 of the ones that we know, to prepare this large mural in the Museum of Anthropology. And here we have the Church of St. Michael Archangel that seems to represent, she seems to be representing this church because we have one of the churches in the mural as a kind of angel or a winged bird. This church is actually located in San Cristobal de las Casas, the St. Michael Archangel's Church. Because of the belief that the inhabitants had that they couldn't be photographed because their soul would be stolen, Leonora carried out a whole series of careful studies, detailed studies, to design the characters that she included in the murals. So here she's taking note of the colors of their clothing for the mural. And some of the figures are clearly come out of the Popol Vuh, the Mayan codex. In the case of the Tepeu Ukulmax that she portrays in this first sketch, that is linked to the moon and to the goddess of fertility. The next one, please. We can see this rainbow crossing the sky and a serpent who's also flying. That represents Kukulkan, which is the Mayan equivalent of Quetzalcoatl, the god. And that crosses the whole composition. Is my time up? I think. Well, my time is up, I'm afraid.